Hello, I'm Doug Holder, and I'm here with my guest, Kevin Carey. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well, Doug. Thanks. And you?
Uh, yeah, I'm okay. And Kevin wrote a fine book, murder mystery, Murder in the Marsh. Um,
Yeah, thanks for
um,
the plug.
and it's actually the review I did for it is going to be in the Somerville Times on Wednesday as well. So thank you.
Thank you for
Um,
that.
yeah. So the
You dropped some
protagonist.
heavy name. You dropped some heavy names in that review. I was really pleased.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we're all influenced by, people. Um, Detective Eddie Devlin, who's the protagonist of your murder mystery, and it takes place in 1980 Revere. Now, why did you choose 1980? Could you have written this in, say, 2020 or 2000, or I mean, is it a specific time and place? Why did you choose?
Yeah, I guess it was closer to me as a younger man,
Okay.
for one thing. And I was still living in the city at that time.
Hmm.
And I've moved away. I don't since my mother died. I don't have any contact with Rivera as much. She lived in the house we grew up in, except
Hmm.
for the last year and a half of her life. So um, it just felt like it was. That's when I knew it best, or the last time I knew it best. So it
Is it
felt
is
right.
it vast? Is it vastly different now? Do you think Revere in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's changed, like a lot of places have, and other ways I feel like it's probably kind of the same. I have very fond memories of growing up there, and I made a point to acknowledge that in the beginning of the novel, because this is fiction, and I've dreamed up a lot of things that may not be accurate, but it was a city that had its challenges back then and probably still does today in some ways.
Now, you're a poet too, of course, and I know you use quotes from some noted North Shore poets such as Mr. Martelli and R.J. Evans and January O'Neill, Jennifer Martelli.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think their little quotes add to your? Why'd you choose to do that? What do they add to you think your story?
Well, I don't know, just kind of tone setters in those places, I think. I mean, Aji's poem or pieces of his poem, kind of set the table for this, for the more abusive things that take place in the novel. And, Jennifer's got that great line that's just um, kind of a moody, atmospheric
Something about
kind of
the
line.
ancient her
Yeah,
ancient history eats her
yeah,
up or something like that. Yeah, I love that.
yeah. If I think it's right here. My quarrel is this ancient blood within myself. And when I saw that line in her poem, and I was putting the novel together, I said that feels like a nice moody line that could set up a section of the novel. And then January's line is a little more about the aftermath of some of these things, and heading home and getting some answers and things like that. So um, it was fun to include them because they're friends of mine, and it was fun to just kind of uh, set up the sections with those introductions. So
Okay, now you're a native son of Revere, um, which is and that's obvious to the rich detail in your novel. I mean, I used to hang out in Revere. I mean, occasionally go out to the bars and all at the beach. Um, but within your book, the Boston skyline is constantly appearing. I mean, how did um, Revere view Boston? I mean, is it some sort of Oz, or is it What, or is it just a
I
place
don't
to
know.
inspire?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that, Revere was its own kind of community. And I don't know if they were really ever wishing that they were in Boston or not. I don't believe so. I don't think Boston was seen as this next step for people in Revere. The community of Revere, from the beach up to North Revere, had its own flavor in different sections of the city. A fairly good sized city. And but it is that, the planes just flying to Logan Airport, right? I mean, I remember them going over my house. I lived down the Point of Pines, which was right before the General Edwards Bridge going into Lynn. And it felt like the planes were taking paint off your house when they went by. They were so low and so close. And it was it had these really strange views of planes landing and taking off, and this Boston skyline in the distance. It was always kind of surreal in a way. It's certainly they're linked. Revere and Boston. I used to joke that when you go to a Celtics game and the guys outside the Garden scalping the tickets were all Revere guys, or some of them anyway. So I think they fed off each other a little bit as far as having a relationship from city to city. But.
Now, Eddie Devlin is a one-time cop with the Revere Police Department, and he lost his job after witnessing a murder of a young girl. He shot the murderer, but he escaped. He tries to rescue his reputation, but more importantly, his sense of self. In a way, do you think the murder, in some way, in perverse way, I guess, the murder was fortunate, at least for him, because it allowed him to confront his demons and bring things out into the forefront that he might have repressed?
Yeah, I think what I was really after, Doug, was just a flawed character, somebody that was maybe not able to handle this traumatic incident. And as the novel grew, maybe found ways to handle it a little better. And I felt like that was a real situation. I mean, there's no promise to me in the novel that Eddie Devlin's going to be 100% okay, but there are signs that maybe he's coming to terms with some of the things that have been demons in his life beyond that incident. So I like the ambiguity of that, and not really setting him on a full path to recovery from all these things, but maybe just a little bit of progress, enough to keep him going. I don't know, maybe for another novel, maybe for a sequel. But, I like the idea of this flawed character that really wasn't a bad guy, but made some bad decisions, and was not able to cope with this incident when it happened initially, but maybe started to work on himself a little bit through the trials of trying to find out what was going on.
Now, you have a sort of romantic interest, Gwen, who's in a wheelchair, and they never consummated their relationship in the traditional sense. But I was wondering about your choice of having this sort of disabled woman, and also why you chose to have show a relationship without, normally people would have, carnal relations, but this never sort of occurred. What was your choice about that?
Well, I felt like their relationship was always one of more about them being able to help each other than fall in love. That they were both kind of victims of different incidents of a similar nature, and that they had this easy rapport with each other. They liked a lot of the same things. They were more friends than lovers, though I think Eddie getting towards the middle of the novel, wanted that to change and wanted to try and make a relationship out of it. But he was a little too much to handle for her to want to take that step. And I like that idea that maybe they both liked each other enough to do that, but just because of who they were in their lives and the situations around the things that happened to them, it just seemed to prevent it. So again, maybe I didn't want anybody to get anything in this novel, that I always wanted the promise of things, but never kind of,
Yeah, well, you didn't get to write those big sex scenes, though, huh?
Yeah. Maybe I'm not good enough at those. I shied away from it. But, it just felt to me like the promise of that, look, it's a pretty dark novel, as you know, reading. And I guess I was hesitant to get too happy at any point about anything. It felt like this was a dark, rainy, gruesome, violent story. And
Yeah.
I just felt like that was the mood that was going to override everything. So I think, them getting together in that way might have given us too much hope. I don't know.
You're a romantic. The Marsh is is a wonderful prop. In fact, I can say it's a central character. It seems to is the Marsh really like that? First off, and tell me about your, using this Marsh as a.
Well, I had some people call me out on that and saying, well, the Marsh doesn't go there and you really can't see the highway from there. And so I took some license with the geography, but, if you drive along North Shore Road, which runs parallel to the beach, there's a section of the Marsh there. And then you're on the Marsh Road that goes into Lynn, and you see the other side of that. And you can see a lot of the Marsh from Route 1 in Saugus looking back towards Revere. So it covers a lot of area. And it actually is kind of a conservation area now. People do some kayaking and stuff in it. And,
are there corpses there? Or?
Well, when I was a kid, there was a lot of mob activity in the city prior to the years I was a kid and into my early years. And there were always stories about bodies getting dumped in the marsh, a mob hit getting, that's where they take them. And I never saw one myself. And I don't know how true a lot of those stories were, if they just came to be folklore. But that was the idea that stuck with me, that there were all these bodies in the marsh, and one of them kind of slipped away from the incident this night and caused this ripple effect of things to take place. So, but the image of the marsh and the bodies in it was I wrote this as a 40-page short story. And what the hell do you do with that, right? I mean, nobody wants a 40-page short story.
I could call it a novella, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes up too much room in a magazine. And so I just kept working on it. And I think the more I developed Eddie and Gwen, the more avenues I saw to make it a bigger story, than it was originally. But I love the Marsh. It has ended up in a few other stories of mine. And, I think of Edgar Allan Poe in The House of Usher, right? Where the house really becomes a character. And so I like the idea of that the Marsh itself really was a character in the story, for me anyway, when I was writing it.
Now, is this the first for you in this genre?
It's first crime novel, yeah. First fictional novel.
So who do you take as influences? I was mentioning, one of my favorites is George Higgins and Dennis Lehane.
Yeah, those guys are great. Parker, certainly. I was always a big fan of Andrew Vox, and Eugene Izzy was a Chicago crime writer. And I used to love that Kate's Mystery Bookstore over in Cambridge.
She
He said,
died recently, the woman.
yeah,
Oh
she
no,
died
yeah.
not too long ago. But you could go into that bookstore and buy a book, and she would know who that writer's favorite author was.
Oh yeah.
Now
Yeah.
she'd have those conversations with you, and you know, recently I like the Irish crime writer Tana French and
Hmm.
James Lee Burke. You know, there's some great crime writers, and all going
You know,
back
a
to
lot of
Chester
people, a lot of
Bennington.
people, you know, I mean, I think it's, I mean, if you do it right, it's, you know, it's serious literature, you know. I mean, some
I
people
think
might
so
say, yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
right,
you know, you could look at Dashiell Hammett that way. I'm sure.
yeah.
You know. So, yeah, and you know, I always was intrigued by the way people talk to each other and in those novels and the kind of rhythm of the
Well, you
dialogue.
really, yeah, you really had an ear for dialogue. I mean, you know, I mean, you must have heard dialogue like that growing up, you know.
Oh, I did, yeah. And you know, my father would tell stories, and you know, my grandfather was involved in politics in the city, and you know, my father would take me to these rallies when I was a little kid and buy me a comic book and throw me in the corner, and you know, there were just characters everywhere, and it kind of, you know, either witnessing it firsthand or you know, listening to my father tell stories about some of these people. I think it was. I think he would have liked it if he was alive. He would have, you know, recognized some of it. So,
Now, final question is, why do you think, why should we read this book?
because it's good. No, I don't know. I had a lot of fun writing it. It's a dark novel, but I think it. I do think that there's some poetry in it. You know, I think there are some passages where I kind of borrow from the other side of me as a writer, and you know, I think it's I think it's an interesting timestamp of a place that you know, you may not know going through it now, and you know, I think to look back at the '80s anywhere is kind of an interesting thing to do, and
We both had
I
big
thought,
hair then, didn't we?
yeah, I did, yeah, big curly hair. Yeah.
Listen, can you read a passage or a short
Oh yeah,
passage? Yes.
sure, yeah. Uh, you know, speaking of the poetry, this is a section that's toward the middle of the book that I like to read.
Mhm.
I'll just start a little further down. It's a little less than a page. He
Okay.
looked, uh, he looked over the streets below him, the packs of goblins, fairies, and monsters cruising up and down the grid like candy-seeking zombies. The sun had set, and the shadows played games with the flowing capes and the rubber masks, disappearing beneath the overhanging branches and behind the tall, stick-built fences. Maybe because the painkillers were still flowing through his system, or the way his head felt, suspended without him, unattached, or maybe not having been outside for so long. But suddenly he felt like he was flying over the rooftops, his arms outstretched, gliding in slow circles above the children, their eyes looking into the sky, some in horror, some in awe, some frozen and staring. And as he flew, the mothers grabbed their children and ran them up the front stairs of their porches, doors slamming and bolting, except for this one child, a black cape and a white painted face. He never ran, never moved. He stood straight and spread his tiny arms as wide as he could, the cape blowing in the wind. He stared back up at the flying creature, bared his long sharp teeth and waited. He knew him. He was all kids, all tough guys, all victims, all people turned inward, facing the fear with more fear, facing the night, facing death with false courage, with a costume to hide behind. But he knew none of it could save the one brave child from being swallowed by the hovering evil, his last thoughts of a warm living room, of his father throwing a football, of his dog climbing on his bed one dark and rainy night, both afraid of the thunder, Nothing could save the brave little boy because he would always remember. And the more he tried to forget, the more it grew, circling him closer and closer until only darkness and cold and sweeping him up.
Thank you, Kevin. Who's the publisher of the book, and where can we purchase it?
Yeah, it's Darkstroke Books in the UK. They're a kind of horror, pulp, and crime publisher.
What's
And
their website?
It's darkstrokebooks.com, but they work exclusively through Amazon. So
Okay.
Kevin Carey, Murder in the Marsh on Amazon, and you'll come right up to it.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Doug. And I hope this is a good year for you
All right.
and everybody else.
Oh, sorry about that.